What do you do when overnight a global pandemic plunges the organization you lead into uncertainty? Welcome to the Pivot. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Pivot. I'm your host, Jen DeVore, Civic Impact Manager at the Economy League of Greater Philadelphia. I'm really excited for our guest today, Marisa Denker, who's co-director of Connect the Dots, which designs stakeholder engagement for impact, something that's clearly very important to the Economy League. We see it as a significant part of our mission to connect diverse leaders and advance shared solutions, which really cannot be done without getting buy-in from the communities we serve. But the question on our mind and everybody's really that works in this area is how can we do this in a post-COVID city? So today we're going to talk to Marisa about how she's creating new ways to engage with stakeholders while keeping distance in mind. But really, it is so much more than just moving everything virtual. So we'll talk a little bit about different techniques and strategies that are still in development, but are an exciting outlook for the future. So Marisa, if you want to join us on camera.
Hi, Jen. How are you?
I'm good. Hi. Thank you so much for being on the show today. It's good to see you.
Me too.
And then just fun fact for people watching at home, Marisa and I are actually neighbors by just a few blocks. So even though we're separate, we're still nearby, which is good in South Philly. So Marisa, tell us, I think it's good to start with maybe what Connect the Dots was before COVID-19 hit. I mean, obviously your goals are the same, your mission is the same, but clearly there's going to be some substantial differences about how you operate. But so I think just to set the framework, if you could talk a little bit about what does business as usual look like for you?
Yeah, so Connect the Dots, as you said, we do stakeholder engagement for impact. So that means we often develop tailored strategies and expert insights to help build cities, regions, and entities that are really focused on the health and happiness of all citizens. So that still applies, but I think we're seeing even more so now how the careful engagement of all voices in a really collaborative and thoughtful way is absolutely critical when we're really engaging and trying to figure out solutions to challenges and to move forward with confidence and trust. So a lot of the work we did pre-COVID was in-person engagement. And of course, there was a digital element to it, but the core of it was in person. So we did a lot of work with, and still do, but with like national government, local government, both in Ireland and Philadelphia. That's where we started, actually. So we would do work around accessibility, public space, transit, cycle lanes, greening, and really about bringing people together through in-person engagement, whether it's breath, workshops, cool pop-ups, just interesting, big community dinners. So a lot of that was, as you're saying, focused on that face-to-face connection between people and really leveling the playing field through getting people to connect as humans to each other, rather than as whatever kind of level they are within like a stakeholder plan. So yeah, and I guess a lot of our work as well in Philly was around public space, particularly too. So we work with Katrina Johnson Zimmerman a lot around evidence-based decision making and working with like city districts, really like Center City District, South Street Head House District, to both observe and to engage people directly to help make design changes to public spaces to make them better for people.
That's great. And who was that you said you worked with? Katrina, can you say that name again? And
Katrina Johnston Zimmerman. She's an urban anthropologist. So she brings like research and observational elements to what we do. And that's why we've been partnering a lot with her lately too.
Awesome. And I think it's so important to note that it's not just about the health of a community, but the happiness too. I love that you incorporate that into your mission, and something that, as you said, really does, finding that those core common values, like being in person to do that, is so important when you're, as you put it, leveling the playing field. And it's a big concern of mine, and something we talk about on the show a lot is about the digital divide, how that's, always been present, but it just feels amplified now. So just something to make note of. So with community engagement not being what it has been, or we don't know what it's going to be yet, but we know that it'll be different. It's really, and I think I got this term from you in our pre-interview, it's uncharted territory. which can be exciting and scary and all those things. So, I don't think today, like, we're not going to have all the answers today, right? But I think what we can do is use our conversation to help people at home that are considering their pivot to identify like the path that they need to get there as we start to find these solutions. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the strategic planning needs that have to be put into place by organizations and companies that are considering their pivots. I just love to hear, some of the work that you've been doing and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think what we've been learning is that it's the time now to act really bravely and to reach out and listen. So what we've been doing a lot of, and what we're encouraging clients and partners that we work with, is to first go directly to your stakeholders. Before making any decisions, before redoing any programming, before turning virtual completely or anything like that, I think it's really important to talk to people first, see where they're at, to listen. And especially now as things are constantly changing as well, that means people's emotional states, their situations, financially, personally, it's constantly changing as well. So I think it's also not just about listening once, it's about listening multiple times, consistently, essentially, throughout this entire recovery process. And I think that's where, once we're listening, then that's where we can have real collaboration. So we worked with the Sunday Breakfast Club recently and continue to work in partnership in terms of bringing those members together to potentially collaborative responses to the crisis. Same with in terms of CDCs, we're talking to various ones like that are directly engaging with communities too, and how it's first about talking to communities, seeing where they rank in terms of even the digital divide, in terms of what they need right now, in terms of what they care about, and then designing from there. So
that's great. And it speaks to something that a previous guest we just had on, Syria Rivera from Providence Center, and that was her number one piece of advice too, was talk to your stakeholders. Her lens was more about funders, but I think stakeholders are in that category of people that are going to affect your programming. So I think that's great and a good reminder to initiate that conversation and be proactive and get ahead of it. So what are some of the things that you've been finding based on these conversations, and what have you been hearing as you're listening twice, or if not 3 times? Yeah.
It's been really interesting. I think like in Ireland, we do a lot of work with the National Disability Authority as well there. So I think we've been approaching it very much from like looking at like the challenges that are emerging are around obviously equity in terms of the digital divide, but also in terms of accessibility for using digital methods as well. So that's been kind of one core concern in terms of how we directly reach out to people, how we make sure that we're reaching out to them appropriately is a big question on people's minds, in terms of making sure that you're not advocating for an agenda right now and not leading by assumptions, but actually doing engagement that makes sense right now. So I think that is a question to think about, to go back to like, why are we doing this and what are the objectives, and then go from there. Because there are, we don't want to force engagement on people when there's so much going on as well. So it's trying to balance that fine line of when it's actually really important to the future of a city, and when it's maybe a bit too much engagement, or do you need to do that additional survey or not, kind of.
Yeah. We are in like a true discovery phase, and that may sound obvious, but I feel like there's so many times, and Economy League does a lot of civic consulting, and of course we produce reports with research and data, but just sometimes people set out with the end result in mind, and intentionally or unintentionally work backwards to get to that, and like we can't do that now. So I think that's an excellent point. No, I think that's great. So you're shaping and leveraging communities, something that's incredibly important to do in person, as we keep on saying. But it's important to build the trust of communities too. I think about I think about going into different communities, or especially in Philadelphia, we're a city of neighborhoods. I think like the first question that's always asked is like, Where are you from? Why are you asking me these questions? Why should I, trust you? And I think that's across the spectrum. And so not being able to do that in person is going to be a challenge, not just for the equitable reasons that we talked about, but again, for those trust exercises. What do you see as the future of connectivity? And I think that could be really general, or it could be really specific. And don't hold back. Like if there's an idea that's like really wild, like we can talk about that too.
Yeah, so I mean, a key thing, even pre-COVID, I guess, within trust building, with Connect the Dots, we really focus on doing this like extra kind of pre-engagement step before we have an engagement process. So that step we found helps both in our previously non-virtual and now remote world.
Yeah.
But because then that's again co-creating with communities and understanding what they need right now and what sort of mechanisms and tools match them best. So the moment like we have been we first created a whole list of all these different tools through all this research of talking to people, doing market research directly to like older people's homes to understand how they best engage with people or different associations. And we have this whole kind of menu of all these different tools that could work. And so now it's been about actually engaging with communities and prototyping with them to see what actually matches each individual community best, and even within communities as well, because there's so many different kind of sects within.
Yeah.
So I think within that though, like in terms of all these different tools, we've very much one not as exciting thing is actually around going back to the oldest methods of connecting in terms of phone, like phone banking. We're talking to a few CTCs that are doing that now. Post radio community call-in radio shows has been something we've been playing around with. And then a key thing, which kind of links to a bigger hopeful idea that we have, but just around really working with nodes and key stakeholders and voices that already exist in communities, and also trying to build up that kind of the community ambassador idea. And there are a lot of other organizations that work per project, I think, in terms of developing ambassadors around whatever project it is, building the capacity, and then having them kind of be the voices that are leading the project rather than this kind of consultation consultant like ourselves. Yeah. So I think that in terms of a bigger idea, like we would love to see a joined up approach to that in Philadelphia. Because I think even before COVID, this has been an idea, but I think it'd be even more important now is just building that capacity across neighborhoods. Because I think a lot of times what happens is that a project will happen in a certain neighborhood, and then that's when that community will get attention, and that capacity will be built, and not before that. So there's still a little bit on the back foot in a way. So I don't know. So it's something we've been thinking about is like how can we kind of at large, but in a tailored way still like develop capacity and develop those ambassadors, because those on the ground nodes are really who have the best connections right now, and the best way to do the on the ground kind of reach out.
Yeah, in a way, it just seems like it's so simple, not in practice, but in theory. And to kind of like when you said call-in radio show, like that just brought back like, memories of like being in the car with my parents and, listening to, whatever talk radio. That's so interesting. And then obviously phones, just those regular phone calls is something that I think people are just now realizing or remembering that like that's still a functional thing. And I know too, just to like give a promo of another episode we have coming up with the census, that's something that they're relying heavily on, is phone banking as well. I think that's really cool. Yeah.
I mean, even trying, like we've been looking at doing focus groups on the phone rather than just like virtual workshops, because we've already developed this method for virtual breakout rooms and making those exciting, but how do you also translate that in a non-virtual way?
Yeah.
We've also been looking from a virtual perspective as well, like virtual project rooms, digital dinners. Like, could we send out food to everyone like we really do, and then still make it this collaborative dinner where we gather insights? There's been some cool, interesting look around texting at scale, like customized texting at scale. Like we haven't tried it yet, but this thing Ground Source sounds really interesting for that. So we want to try that soon. And I know we're also looking at like connecting physical to virtual more. So like using QR codes to then, in grocery stores or nearby key nodes and then going from there.
No, and I'm like obsessed with QR codes because I always thought that it was such a complicated piece of technology. And I'm sure at one point it was, but when I learned that with my phone, and like you need to have a smartphone, right? So it's not totally accessible to everybody, but if you have a smartphone, I learned that you don't have to have a special app to download. Like you could just take a picture of it. And once I learned that, it like blew my mind. So it's kind of one of those things that's so simple, like it's essentially taking a picture of something. Yeah. But I think because I know at least from my own experience and from other people I've talked to, like there's this rush to think so far ahead into technology that, I mean, this is such a great reminder to just take a step back and like what already exists.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, because we've even been seeing some like larger kind of engineering firms, like the really big type, creating like whole like digital fancy like room for engagement. But it's kind of interesting. It's useful to a degree, but so much already exists that can actually be brought together, I think, more strongly by adding that human engagement element to it in a different way. Yeah. So and also with the digital, again, it's still that issue, and this almost links to a bigger idea as well, like really attacking the digital divide in Philadelphia. And like I know there are organizations that are working towards this and have been and doing a great job, but it's definitely bringing into higher relief that we need even more organizations caring about this and directly impacting the topic, because it's in terms of technical capacity of people. It's not just giving someone a computer. It's, beyond that as well. And then even if they have a smartphone, it's like, how do we really get people feeling confident to participate in these conversations too?
That's great. No, I think that's great. So what are some, I know we talked about the findings from, talking to, your current partners and clients and, kind of an understanding of where they're at. But is there anything else that you've realized or discovered that you think would be important to share with viewers at home while they're considering their own shift?
I guess one thing, I've talked about, in a way, the talking to people first. So that's kind of that empathy lens, I think, is really important right now, and really focusing on that. But I also think a big thing that's been coming up is around like honesty and transparency, and not being afraid to say that you don't know something. And to, I think a lot of organizations are used to everyone thinking they have the answers and used to providing the answers. So I think it's important, and I think it's totally fine to be like, we're trying to figure this out still. What do you think? Let's try this. Does it work? Did it not work for you? Okay, let's try something different. So really like having that conversation as like equals with your constituents, your stakeholders, I think in that transparency angle is really important, because it's like, we tried and here's what we were thinking we tried, kind of thing. I think that's that's the key thing we've been learning. We've preached that before, I guess, but it's even just feeling more important now for people to feel comfortable actually being fully transparent as much as they can.
Awesome. I think that's great advice. Marisa, thank you so much for being on the show. This is so informative. It's even given me some like really concrete ideas about the programming that I'm running at the Economy League outside of the Pivot. And I'm so psyched about QR codes, because I really do think, because like the number of people that have access to a smartphone versus a computer is so different. And with the tech, the tech ability of a QR code being fairly minimum, I don't know, just like a side note, I'm very excited. I told you I was going to be excited about this during our pre-interview, and I'm just showcasing, I'm just showing that now. Yeah. But no, thank you so much. If people wanted to talk more with you, learn about the work you're doing and your findings, or engage in your services, what's the best way for them to contact you?
So we have our website, connectthedotsinsights.com, and my personal email would be marisa@connectthedotsinsights.com.
That's great. All right, so I'm going to share some of your information now. Thank you, Marisa Denker, co-director of Connect the Dots. You can find them on Twitter and connectthedotsinsights.com. So check them out there. And just a reminder, you are watching The Pivot presented by the Economy League. You can find us on social media as well, and you can watch this episode and more at economyleague.org/thepivot. Thank you all very much. Marisa, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks so much, and thanks to everyone for listening in. Talk soon.